aliens. Positively sure I'm absolutely mad about something. Oh, I'm positively sure I'm absolutely crazy too. Oh. Hi, my name is Mark Starr and welcome to Little Green Man, the show that I think fairly conclusively shows that Canadian politics, particularly provincial politics, can be very, 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 very sexy indeed. In fact, right now, the sexy politics, the thing that everybody seems to be wanting to talk about, is Donald Trump, election, meddling in the election by the Russians, and so on and so forth. And that we've often been hearing over the last few years about election fraud, people voting twice, voter ID laws, and so on and so forth, all of which tend to really scaring people away from electing and becoming in itself a election fraud. But that's another story. I have done a video on that. Maybe I'll put a card up if I remember. But right here, we've had a by-election very recently in St. Boniface, which is an area of Winnipeg where a certain kind of meddling in an election and election fixing, if you will, has happened here and has very, very recently come to light. So we've got a situation where we have the Sustainable Development Minister Rochelle Squires has squashed a report, at least temporarily, about heavy metals, including lead, in people's and the environment. So people will potentially be ingesting this, particularly it's fruits and vegetables that people are going to be consuming. And she knew it as early as June 4th. And so how does all this fit in and what does this really mean? So we'll go down to the bottom of this article. This is a free press article and I've got to get rid of that because it's going to drive me nuts. Thank you. Right, so scroll down there. So in August 15, there was some Rochelle Squires said there's no need for concern. I don't know why there would be no need for concern. Probably didn't want to spend the money, I suspect. That tests were actually done starting August. The important parts there, Rex Salinger stepped down, freeing up St. Boniface, and then, of course, then an election was to be called. So now we have the Manitoba Sustainable Development came forward with the reports, which showed, at least in one sample, that they came back 6 times higher than residential standards for lead levels. A full 2 weeks later, Brian Pallister called the election. June 21st, Squires and the Sustainable Development Squires and the Sustainable Development Director had a face-to-face meeting where the results were quashed. Was discussed and quashed. I'm getting crazy. The province then sends letters on July 13th, a full month later, only a few days, 2 or 3 days before the election, by snail mail. What are the odds that they were expecting them to get those letters by July 17? There was, as far as I'm aware, no announcement was made on local radio or to the press or anything, not that I'm aware of. Just leaving it on snail mail to let them know. Certainly not in enough time to affect anybody's votes, that's for sure. And then, of course, August 20th, then she admits that she did misinform the press a little bit, whatever that really means. But whichever way you look at it, 6 times the standard level of lead has got to be bad, and lead has been connected with a whole slew of ailments and of diseases and nothing good, really. So why would she withhold this? Well, obviously, if she has obviously been very at arm's length, didn't really want to do the study, but the study has now been shown that the residents were right to be worried about the levels of lead, and as this came, then withholding it would then make it, if she'd actually released the report, then it would have made the Conservative candidate look really, really bad, and absolutely people would not have put their vote towards the Conservative Party that was gaslighting them this whole time about these health issues. Now, of course, the usual excuses come up. Well, her staff didn't tell her, even though she was carbon copied on emails right from the very beginning. She knew what was going on and still withheld it. There can be no other reason than this was intentionally withheld for just to give the Conservative candidate a better chance of running in this election. So really, can this is maybe not as insidious as Russia collusion, if that actually exists, and it's not as insidious as voter ID laws that are intended to keep people keep people off the voters' roll or keep them away from the polls. But this is just as bad, because now people need to know the truth. They need the facts. Democracy only works if people have accurate and truthful and factual information. Because if they don't, then they are going to vote against their own best interests, against the best interests of the community, the best interests of their country, based on withholding evidence. So this is really nothing more than lying by omission. And if it was her staff that withheld this report, then she's incompetent because she can't control her staff. And if she deliberately did it, well, I mean, that's absolutely disgusting if she had. Now, she's not the only politician that has ever done this. So let's not just pick on her. Let's pick on all of the politicians and all of the parties. I'm sure that Brian Pastor knew what was going on as well and was part of that decision as well, I don't doubt. But at the very least, she needs to be held accountable. And that ministers and politicians that are found doing this should never, ever, ever be allowed to run for office again. They should be banned from holding any kind of public office because they cannot be trusted. And if we have someone that is withholding information in a democratic system, then we don't really have democracy. We're voting on things that we can't know about. And if we're voting on ignorance, then we may as well not be voting at all. Little Green Man. This is the back door to the Manitoba legislature. Now, if you hit the subscribe button now, hit the notification bell, then you won't be surprised when they try to stick something up your back door. Hi, my name's Mark Stowell and welcome to Little Green Man, where politics of the Canadian variety is considered very, very sexy. If we are to take self-proclaiming right-wingers, conservatives, libertarians and other neoliberals at their word, they hate regulations. And they're the first and loudest to shout against them. Regulations are bad, evil, disgusting, get rid of them! But here in Manitoba, our Orwellianly named progressive conservatives have actually named a day after their hatred of regulations. It's called Red Tape Reduction Day, or as I call it, Anti-Human Neoliberal Ideology Day. But why do they think regulations are bad? Because it impinges on our freedoms and liberties, they say. Except they don't. Most regulations don't infringe on an average human being's liberties at all. Many regulations ensure freedom and liberty. Some regulations ensure liberty and freedom from being harmed or killed at work, or ensure that people can't easily get ripped off by loan sharks and so on. Actually, regulations prevent businesses and corporations and the rich people that own them from making bag loads more money than they want to make. You see, they can't make enough of the stuff. I'm sure you know the capitalist mantra, gimme, 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 more, 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 mine, mine, mine. And from that point of view, regulations are bad because they stop businesses from making obscene amounts of money, because keeping people safe from harm and not ripping them off costs corporations and the rich people that own them the profits. Or it prevents them from legally stealing more money, and that, they say, is wrong. Voter ID! No, I didn't just change the subject. I'm still talking about regulations, except this regulation is good. It is holy, it is wonderful, and we must spread it around the world. At least the leaders of conservative parties say so. The voter ID is a regulation, make no mistake about that. It is a regulation that is now a requirement in many states right across the US. It is now here to a lesser degree in Manitoba, and make no mistake, it is a regulation that conservatives all around the world and the people who preach that regulations are bad say is good. Even though regulations are bad, oh, it's a good job I'm not a Star Trek robot, because my head would have exploded on that one. Now, the voter ID regulation actually prevents people from voting. Many people don't have photo ID, so they need to go out of their way to get some. Some people can't afford photo ID. And of course, what about people who don't own a house, can't find permanent residence, or are transient, whether homeless on the streets or sleeping on a friend's couch or whatever? Now, for some people, voting is the only thing they need photo ID for. This is tantamount to a poll tax. You have to pay the government to vote. It disenfranchises the poor, people who would likely vote against right-wing parties. So now you see why, in the eyes of conservative leaders, this regulation is good and holy. But I hear you cry, what about voter fraud? To which I say, what voter fraud? It is virtually non-existent. In the UK, where they have just started to try out the voter ID laws, was there a need for it? There must be, otherwise why would the regulation haters be fighting so hard for this regulation? The answer is no, a resounding no. In 2017, there was only one conviction for voter impersonation in the UK, meaning there was only one verifiable instance of voter impersonation. But reports show that in last week's borough council elections, dozens of people were prevented from voting. If these laws went countrywide, it could mean thousands upon thousands of people would get refused a chance to vote. All to defend against a single verifiable case of voter fraud. And likewise in Canada, voter impersonation at the ballot box, just like in the UK and the US, is virtually non-existent. A single false case of voter fraud will likely make no difference at all, but thousands of people being denied a vote could swing an election. This regulation actually produces the effect that the cowardly conservatives say we must regulate against. It has been public knowledge for decades that the fewer people that turn up at the polls, the higher the proportion of the vote go that the conservative parties get. And the more people who show up to vote, the higher the proportion of votes go to centrist or left-wing parties. There is no voter fraud to speak of. Voter ID is itself the fraud. A need for security where security isn't needed. A regulation on human beings that restricts their ability to vote. So let's back up. It's worth understanding why regulations prevent corporations and the rich people that own them from making more money. Regulations serve two purposes, as I said earlier, to reduce the risk of physical harm to you and your family, friends, and fellow human beings, making people wear a harness when going up on a scissor lift or a cherry picker, putting physical barriers up in a factory to prevent workers from losing toes, fingers, or even from being killed. They reduce pollution from poisoning your drinking water supply, so you don't die of lead poisoning.
Flint still doesn't have clean water!
Yeah, what she said. And secondly, it is to prevent you from being ripped off financially, say by onerous interest rates from loan sharks, like private banks, being overcharged for something or not getting the product you paid for, and making sure your employer pays you for the work you've done, like minimum wage and overtime rates and so on. Following these regulations costs corporations time and money. Money they would rather put in the pockets of the rich people that own them. Who cares if you or your family get ripped off financially or die working for them? Well, they don't. But regulations on citizens apparently is not only okay, it is absolutely necessary to keep the human beings under control. Regulations on corporations and the rich people that own them are evil, but regulations on ordinary people like you and me are wholly good, especially if they discourage you or they prevent you from voting for the other party. Because to neoliberals, human beings don't matter at all. Little Green Man. This is the back door to the Manitoba legislature. Now, if you hit the subscribe button now, hit the notification bell, then you won't be surprised when they try to stick something up your back door. Hi, my name's Mark Staller. Welcome to Little Green Man. Today I'm going to talk about Bill 24. It's a piece of omnibus legislation, an omnibus bill put forward by the Progressive Conservative Party, the party in power. They have a majority, so there's little chance that any bill they put forward that they really want to go through is going to go through. It cannot be blocked. So the Red Tape Reduction and Government Efficiency Act, I've read it many times, read it several times and gone through it over. Nothing in this bill at all to demonstrate efficiencies with regards to red tape. None whatsoever. There are cuts, though, that offer much needed protections for Manitoba, So there are going to be some anti-minister from being in control and having points of decision making in the Labour Relations Act and the Consumer Protections Act. And they're replacing him with a director. Instead of having an elected official overseeing these areas, they're going to have a director involved. So not an elected official, an assigned civil servant is going to be overseeing these things. Now, particularly with the Consumer Protection Act, when you look in that, it actually involves the payday loans is in there. And it is going to end up, no doubt, making those loans being far more a higher interest, to make it really, really difficult for individuals, working people, to pay them back. I mean, people are taking out these loans because they're having a hard time, and now you're going to make that time even harder by increasing that interest. So why then would they want to take out the minister? So something simple called plausible deniability. It wasn't us, it wasn't the party, it wasn't the government, it was that civil servant over there. And it's plausible deniability. It wasn't us, even though they put the law in place, and the result of these laws, or lack of regulation in these areas that hurt people and that will hurt the environment, it's not our fault, it's the civil servant. See how that works? So there's another thing too, that if this is about just simply reducing red tape, then why? Why on earth would they be repealing, and they are repealing, the Public-Private Partnership, Transparency and Accountability Act? What is there in that red tape that's slowing anybody down? There's nothing there. This is, now, if you're not sure of what public-private partnership is, it's P3. It's where public money and private money are mixed together, so effectively one step closer to privatising public services. So they want to privatise schools. They've made that clear earlier this year. I've done a video about that, and there'll be a link around here somewhere, and you can look at that and review my thoughts on that as well. But they also are looking at privatising healthcare. They're desperate to privatise the healthcare. And they're realising that running government, it actually costs money, and it's not just about cut, we can make it work. No, now they are looking at raising money through either a healthcare premium, or they're going to raise or they're going to keep the PST up. I thought that maybe that's just why they're talking about the healthcare premium. They just want to keep the PST going. But why on earth would you want to get rid of an act that encourages transparency and accountability in a public-private partnership? Corporations taking public money and spending it and making a profit on it, but we're not allowed to see what's going on behind the scenes. That's despicable. It really is. That's absolutely nothing to do with efficiency and red tape at all. Now, talking about private-public partnerships, in 2010, Nova Scotia's Auditor General said that the province could have saved $52 million if it had built the schools the traditional way and not used the P3 model. So that's a lot of money. You know what? We can say that this law is, if it's not to make corporations and the rich people that own them richer, it's certainly going to make the people that run these schools $52 million. Certainly they'll be rich afterwards, and it'll be on public money. And there are lots of problems with P3. Again, check out my video on that. Now, there's another part of this law as well, where they're removing the requirement to provide periodic reports on Manitoba's ecological resources. Why would you not want to know what's going on in the ecology of Manitoba? Why would you not want to know how your wildlife are doing, and how the air is doing, how the quality of water, all these good things that we need to live and to have a nice, beautiful province, so to keep it beautiful? Why would you get rid of those reports? Wouldn't you want to know ahead of time so that you can do something about it and prevent the destruction of our province? And there's also another thing too, as well, restricting the laws on hog farming. That there's a scientific studies. David Schindler, and Dr. Peter Levitt and others have clearly demonstrated that the hog industry has been a significant factor in the toxic algal blooms in Lake Winnipeg. No reports, but you can do more and more hog farming now under this law. So it doesn't actually cut red tape, it just makes you less safe. And now with what we know about climate change, the cuts to regulation that are needed to protect the environment is just insane. Why would you do that? Well, because they continue cuts to the regulations that keep people safe. I mean, really, that's an obscenity. And at the end of this, really, I think that there's only one real goal in this, is to make private companies make a profit, regardless of the harm it does to the people and the environment. The P3 is clear on that. That they don't want to protect the working people who are having a hard time making ends meet. So payday loans, interests are going to go through the roof. Rich people are going to get richer on the backs of people who are already having a hard time. That there's no accountability. This takes away any accountability from the government, taking it off the backs of the responsibility off the backs of the elected officials and put it on civil servants. Wasn't me, wasn't my party. You can't see what we're doing. We can do what we want. Ha 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 ha. And you've got no evidence to the contrary until it's too late. So what I say then is let's call this bill what it is. It's not about red tape reduction at all. Let's call it what it really is. The Making Manitoba Unsafe for Manitobans and Government Unaccountability Act. Little Green Man.